Hey, John, how are you today?
Hi, Elliot. Doing well, thanks. As you know, we just finished doing our webinar with the Antiquities Coalition and an exciting report that just got distributed. So hopefully in the future, we'll be able to talk more about that on one of these conversations.
That'd be great. So, the excitement this week is the release of the so-called FinCEN Files by the International Consortium of Investigative Journalists in conjunction with BuzzFeed. What do you think about this?
Well, as somebody who was around at the creation of the SAR and always believed that this was such an important data point, it's more than troubling, obviously, that thousands of SARs were leaked. What I've heard from sources is it came out of the same leak of the original one, the plea agreement that happened with the FinCEN employee. So it's in that batch of documents. So, I'm looking at this a little differently, perhaps than others, more as a go forward issue. So the hope is going forward that this won't cause bankers to feel they're going to default to not filing because they're fearful that what they might file could end up in the newspapers or on social media, what have you. And obviously, it's easy for us to say from the sidelines, but I'm really hoping that's not the case.
Yeah, I agree with you. They have proved to be valuable for both law enforcement and national security. We could have a lot of discussions about whether the form could be better and lots of things like that. But the concept of identifying suspicious activity and getting it to people who can do a law enforcement or a national security type of investigation is still an important thing to do. What other impacts besides that potential one do you see from the leak and from the related stories?
Well, I think because some of the stories provide some support for the notion that some financial institutions were continuing to have relationships after these filings, which, as you and I both know, that's not always that simple. It could be law enforcement told them to keep the accounts open. There's all sorts of reasons for that. But because of that, we've seen some policymakers issue some statements on the Senate and the House side. And as we've talked about, House and Senate are now actively considering legislation that would do some tweaking to the SAR process and perhaps create a secondary SAR for structuring, maybe adjust thresholds, maybe create priorities issued by the Treasury and FinCEN so that financial institutions would focus on those as reporting elements versus others. So I think there's some of that. There's also the advance notice of proposed rulemaking that we've talked about that is asking the public what it thinks of the AML infrastructure. So I think even though this is not great news that these documents were leaked, it could result in a more swift consideration of adjusting and changing the SAR structure, because there are some things that clearly could be improved. There's no question. So I'm looking at it as an opportunity as opposed to something more negative.
Yeah, another opportunity in there, and again, as part of any reform, would be whether there would be additional funding for the FIU function at FinCEN. For a country our size and with the volume of reporting that runs through there, the more traditional FIU piece, they're relatively thinly staffed. I think there's only about 300 folks there. So I know that a lot of the analysis gets handled by other agencies, under their coordination, but a lot of countries, the FIUs, keep that in-house, and that's certainly a question that could be considered in the part of any kind of reform activity.
Yeah, and look, I think since the first leak, which again, we believe this is part of it, I am confident that FinCEN has made adjustments. So it's certainly important to protect that data. Financial institutions have to continue to have confidence in the system, and I think they will after this settles down a bit.
I agree with you. Well, I'm sure that there'll be more for everybody to read about this, but on a go-forward basis, we'll continue to follow all the things that are happening, and we'll talk about them every week. So I'll talk with you next week.
Thanks, Elliot. And again,
Yep.
stay safe.
Yeah, you too.